The War of the Worlds is one of H.G. Wells' most well-known books. This book is narrated by an unnamed main character after Martians invade Earth, and the aftermath of that invasion. This is one of the first books to popularize the idea of extraterrestrial life invading Earth, and what could happen if a hyper-advanced species invades the planet. This is only the second H.G. Wells book I've read, along with The Time Machine, but I can already tell that he's becoming one of my favorite authors. The War of the Worlds was one of my favorite books I read last year. Although this book was written in the late 19th century, and it takes place in the late 19th century, it doesn't come off as old-fashioned. It is still a very relevant book, even in the 21st century. That being said, you do kind of need to place yourself in this time period and realize that humanity didn't necessarily have the defenses to counteract this alien invasion as we obviously would have now. I mean, for example, flight hadn't even been invented yet. This is a very, very fast-moving book with hardly any time to breathe in between big events. That is actually very similar to The Time Machine, where Wells doesn't necessarily focus on building characters or doing in-depth scene or setting building. Instead, Wells focuses on the story itself and all of the big events that take place. Wells is able to create a very vivid picture of the horror and chaos of the Martians, who use their advanced technology to destroy humanity. This includes things like giant tripods, heat rays, and shields. The book starts off with the Martians landing on Earth right away, and then it follows the events that follow over the next couple of weeks. This makes for a very quick and exciting read, and also for a pretty short book. This edition is only about 150 pages, so you could probably read through this book in a week or less. I can see how some people might consider that a negative. Me personally, I don't really consider it a negative, but if you go into this book, just realize that it is a very quick read. Since it is such a short book, you really don't get to know much about the characters and their lives. The main character who's narrating this story actually isn't even named. However, I kind of like the fact that he's not named because as the reader you can relate more to him, and honestly you can kind of put yourself into his shoes. In a way, it's kind of like you're not necessarily reading about somebody else, but rather about yourself when the Martians invade. It's definitely interesting. Other than the main character, the only other characters that are really important to the story are his family, including his wife and his brother. But again, you don't really get to know much about those characters or what they experience. However, that's not really the point of this story. As the reader, we are placed in the shoes of the narrator and follow him along and witness the things that he witnesses in the couple weeks after the Martians invade. Talking about the aliens themselves, I really like how Wells writes them almost like a horror story. These creatures are terrifying, formidable, and seemingly undefeatable. They are quickly and systematically destroying everyone in their way. And how they feed off of other creatures' blood to nourish themselves? Yeah, this book definitely has some horror elements to it. Especially considering some of the things that main character witnesses, which I won't spoil here. The tension that Wells was able to put into this story as it follows the main character over the couple weeks is really incredible. And honestly, it's not hard to see why some people might consider this horror. Me personally, I definitely consider it science fiction, but it does have some horror elements to it. You might have heard of the infamous 1930s radio broadcast that some people actually thought was reporting actual events and led to some nationwide hysteria. This, of course, was the radio adaptation of this book, which was presented as news bulletins after Martians invade the Earth. If you want further proof of the tension that Wells was able to create in this book, look no further than that example. There is some serious danger in this book, and throughout reading it, you're definitely not sure who, if anyone, is going to make it out alive. And there are definitely a couple of instances where you will be sitting on the edge of your seat with the tension that Wells was able to create. One other aspect of this book that I really liked was how it's presented as observational and passive in the telling of this story. The main character narrating this story is just a normal person as he witnesses the events. He doesn't actively fight back, and he's definitely not a hero character. This is definitely unlike a lot of other similar books about aliens invading Earth where the main character is portrayed as a hero and actively fights back. So I found that to be pretty cool. The only negative thing I can say about this book is that I found the ending to be a little anticlimactic. And this is your warning: if you want to avoid spoilers, please skip this section of the video. The resolution of this book is that the aliens died from bacteria on Earth. And I'm sorry, but an alien civilization traveling all the way to Earth didn't do the most basic research to see if they could survive in our atmosphere. That would be like if when humans first went to the moon, the astronauts took off their helmet and then died randomly and everyone was confused. I mean, okay, maybe that's not a perfect analogy, but still, I kind of thought that was ridiculous. Really, I just found the ending of this book to be a little bit disappointing and a little too convenient for humanity. Was this enough to ruin the book for me? No, I mean, definitely not, but it still was a pretty big negative in my opinion, and looking back at it, it definitely hampered my enjoyment of this story, which is unfortunate. And one more thing worth mentioning, it's never clearly defined what the motivation was for the Martians to invade Earth. I didn't really find this to be much of a negative, but I know a lot of readers like to see motivation behind events in stories, and in this book, you don't really get that. All of that being said, it's not hard to see why this book is considered a classic. It helped establish and popularize this type of story, which other creators and authors have built off of. And other than that anticlimactic ending, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. If you are at all interested in reading classics or science fiction, I definitely recommend you check this out. Let me know if you have any comments down below. Thanks for watching.